coming at you from the Beaver County Auto studios up above Market Square here in downtown Pittsburgh. This is another short version of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I am your host, Mike Asti. Sidney Crosby is still the best in the world, and the stats don't have to prove it. That's right, Sidney Crosby tells the world, answers the debate, and calms the doubters to say he is still the very best in the world. And it just goes off of his game winner against the Edmonton Oilers, 2 goals on the night, 0 coming into the game, which added more fodder to the McDavid-Crosby debate going into Penguins versus Oilers. But Crosby ends up with 2 goals on the night, including the game winner in overtime. And that overtime goal was just phenomenal in terms of maybe the goal of the year. So 0 goals going into the night, and leaves the night with maybe the goal of the year, winning another game for the Penguins. But goals aren't going to tell this whole story. McDavid with 5 of them, Crosby with only the 2. Crosby 7 points on the year, McDavid with 13. There you go. Connor McDavid, 13 points on the year, 8 assists, 5 goals, 7 games played. Sidney Crosby giving you the 7 points, a little better plus minus, whatever you think of that stat. 2 goals, 5 assists, also 7 games played. So again, goals aren't going to tell the whole story here. McDavid has more. Crosby, little sluggish in terms of goals scored to start the year. Overall points still producing every now and then. The Penguins starting off to a slower start than you would like, but the offense still clicking in all cylinders, whether or not getting goals from Sidney Crosby. And Crosby answered the doubters, because even though goals don't matter in this debate, and even though Crosby is the best in the world, regardless of whether he's scoring the most goals or not, or even has the most points or not, when he needs to answer that debate and when the buffoons are out there bringing up Connor McDavid versus Sidney Crosby, a 21-year-old Connor McDavid versus a 31-year-old Sidney Crosby going into that game, Crosby answered the doubters. He answered it. He answered the debate emphatically with an exclamation point, telling the world he is still, hashtag and still, the very best in the world. Just few headlines here on Pittsburgh Hockey Now. Signature goal, a statement shows Sid still got it. Sid still got it. Shelley Anderson with that gem there on Pittsburgh Hockey Now. And then even here, still the best. Crosby jaw dropper, and it was. Beats Edmonton 6-5 in overtime. As Sidney Crosby tells the world he is still the very best. And yes, he had those 2 goals. Yes, without those goals, obviously the Penguins don't beat the Oilers, and the fact they needed those, and the fact they defensively kind of collapsed, and the defensive questions, and even Matt Murray and net, whatever you want to think of all that, we'll leave that for another day. We'll leave that for Dan Kingerski on any of his programs, any of his Penguins live chats, or maybe his Dan Kingerski show. But for the sake of this, Crosby scores, they win. That's what Crosby's been doing most of his career. He's been a multiple-time MVP. He's been a multiple-time scoring champion. He's accomplished everything individually and team-wise throughout his whole career. There's 3 Stanley Cups, the gold medals, the All-Star appearances, the hardware, and then some. There's nothing he hasn't done. He's triple gold times 10 in the NHL individually and team-wise. And Connor McDavid, only a few years into his career, much younger, a decade younger, hasn't accomplished what Sidney Crosby already even accomplished at that point. Crosby's second year, he was MVP of the league, was able to take his team to a Stanley Cup final just a few years into his career and then win the Cup a year after. So Crosby on a quicker trajectory, whether it be individual awards and team hardware, than where Connor McDavid is right now. And not all of that is exactly fair. I understand that in terms of Connor McDavid's team around him, what the Oilers have around him that used to have Taylor Hall and his MVP now with the Devils, but no longer does. He was shipped out and was sluggish there with the Oilers. And the myriad of draft picks they failed upon. It's mostly been the Connor McDavid show. And Sidney Crosby's had better teammates, which has led to the team's success. And you're not going to be able to do it on your own. But that also speaks to why Connor McDavid's goal total, even his point total, doesn't make him better than Crosby if it's higher. It doesn't make him the best in the world because he had more goals and more points than Sidney Crosby so far into the year. It's going to happen. It makes sense. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Crosby's going to get more team success and have an easier time winning Stanley Cups and team success and leading his team into the playoffs that McDavid's only done once so far, and Crosby had done many more times and won a championship earlier in his career. Only, 4 years or so, 4 or 5 years into his career. McDavid's on that point now and definitely not looking like that's going to happen. So when you have more talent around you, this is common sense, folks. When you have more talent around you, you're going to have an easier time of winning championships and having team success. So I'm not going to hold it against McDavid that he's not done that yet or not got his team past the second round of the playoffs. There's still time for him to do that. But what I am going to bring up here in the fact that Crosby's still the very best in the world, if not proven by that game with the 2 goals, including the game winner, and dazzling, the jaw-dropping game winner and goal of the year over Edmonton in overtime. If that wasn't enough for you, then let's also bring up the fact that that shouldn't have had to happen to make it so for you. You shouldn't have needed that to say Crosby's still the best in the world. What Crosby does for his team in terms of a two-way player, in terms of also going back defensively, in terms of being able to set up teammates, make teammates better, in terms of dealing with whoever is the wing on his line, in terms of dealing with all the shuffling, in terms of dealing with everything going on and really being more of a leader on the ice. That right there makes Crosby better. And the fact that McDavid has more points, the fact that McDavid has more goals, as I said, it's going to happen. Why? He has less around him. So the Oilers are asking him to do more. They need him to do more to win. That's true. I've even argued in the past on other outlets that the Washington Capitals in the past asked and needed Alexander Ovechkin to do more for them to win than Crosby's had to do for the Penguins, which has led him to win championships and win more of those series because he's had to do less. So if he has an off series, they can still win. Malkin, Kessel, whoever can pick the team up, if maybe even going to goaltending. McDavid hasn't had that luxury yet for a goaltender to carry him through anything, to stand on his head. He hasn't really had an elite goaltender at all. He hasn't really had elite defensemen. He hasn't had many other great players around him. You can go to Taylor Hall, but he wasn't who he is now when he was with McDavid. They've missed on many first-round draft picks. You go to Edmonton to die and need revived in your career. McDavid's been able to have success in spite of all of that, with 200-plus point seasons already in his first 4 years. And maybe on pace to do it again here this year. But he has more opportunities to score more goals and going to have more points because he's asked to do more. There's less around him. The points and goals, when they're scored, are going to be his for the Oilers to win. And if they're a playoff team, he's going to have to give you 40-plus goals and maybe 100 points, or it's just not going to happen. He's more of the Lone Ranger there, where as Crosby's setting up teammates or maybe opening up the offensive rush and leading to the goal, even if he doesn't get the assist, because there's so much talent around him. So don't be fooled. Don't say McDavid has more goals, more points, and he's already the best in the world right now, and Crosby takes a back seat. He's 31, McDavid's 21. McDavid's up and coming. He's going to be the best player in the world when Crosby's done, and maybe before Crosby's done. Someday, Crosby may give that up to Connor McDavid. It may be the Connor McDavid show. It may become Connor McDavid's National Hockey League. And he's right up there right now, maybe the most prolific goal scorer overall, right there with Ovechkin, but McDavid doing it at a better clip. He's younger. He's more of the future. Maybe one of the better offensive players in the league, could even say that. But to say overall best in the world with how great of a two-way player Crosby still is, the fact that Crosby can do so much no matter who he's playing with, and yes, his teammates and line mates sometimes can help him and are better to lead him to championships, but when you're talking about the best very individual in this game, it's not Ovechkin, despite winning a Stanley Cup finally, and he's a great offensive player. He's a great goal scorer, maybe the most prolific goal scorer ever. I could have that debate with you between him and Gretzky in terms of the difference of eras and how many goals Ovechkin has in this era, more of a dead puck era, to when Ovechkin played with a wide open game. but not a better overall player than Sidney Crosby. Malkin, a great player, a great teammate, not a better player than Sidney Crosby. Connor McDavid, a great player, a budding superstar, an offensive force and juggernaut, but not Sidney Crosby. And the stats don't have to tell the story. But I will kind of caution all of you as I put a bow on this short version of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. If you're going to compare Crosby to McDavid, do it by what Crosby accomplished throughout his first 4 or 5 years, when he was 21 years old even, to what he accomplished at that same point or around that same point to McDavid. And yes, it was more, and his teammates were better, and he had a better team around him than what Edmonton's providing. And maybe he didn't have as many points and goals, and maybe won't finish with more points and goals at the end of their careers. And maybe McDavid is somebody that's asked to do more and going to score more, yet also win less and do less overall on both sides of the ice. So talk about both men at 21 years old. If you're going to compare them, and I'd prefer you not, but of course I know that won't happen. I can't always get my way with you guys. Don't compare, though, the resumes overall of Crosby at 31 years old accomplishing everything he possibly can in the NHL over a decade plus in versus Connor McDavid, who's been in the league a few years at 21 years old. That's not going to be fair. That's a bit ridiculous. But Crosby accomplished more and was better overall at where McDavid is in his career a few years in and at that same age. And right now, as we stand here present day, Sidney Crosby is still the very best in the world. And let me tell you, the stats don't have to tell the story. Just look at these headlines. There it is, a signature goal. A statement shows Sid's still got it. Still the best. Crosby jaw dropper beats Edmonton 6-5 in overtime. Yep, Connor McDavid, more goals, more points. Crosby's still doing it big, though. And Crosby's still the very best in the world, regardless of what the stats show you. They don't tell the whole story. He does more overall, has more around him. It's going to be more of a spread-out offensive game. Whereas Connor McDavid, all the offense is going to generate through him. He needs to do more. He'll be asked to do more goals and assists. Doesn't mean he's better, though, than Sidney Crosby, who is still the very best in the world. Hashtag and still. Do an old school Ronda Rousey for us. Hashtag and still for Sidney Crosby as still the best in the world. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube there. Pittsburgh Sports Live on the YouTube channel. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at PGH Sports Live. Make sure to follow me on Twitter there, Mike Asti at Mike Asti 11. Check out our websites, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Pittsburgh Soccer Now, Pittsburgh Sports Now there with the mothership, and of course where this show and all of our visual Pittsburgh Sports Live content can be found, pghsportslive.com. So there you go, Pittsburgh Sports Live there on YouTube. You can find it there as well. That's the most important place to go, as it makes it easier for us to bring this radio golden content, visually golden content, golden quality broadcast to you, the people. When you subscribe, you'll automatically be notified when this happens, and we won't have to overly promote anything if that's what you think we're doing. But we're not going to stop either way, so can't stop, won't stop kind of type of thing here at PSL. Sidney Crosby is still the best in the world, and we're still the best in the world at what we do. And I'll leave that subjective. It's the old Chris Jericho. Doesn't mean we're overall the best, but it's the best in the world at what we do, whatever you think that is. But Sidney Crosby is the best in the world, and there's no debate there. It's not subjective. It's a fact. This has been another gold quality edition here, a Penguins shorty version of Mic Drop on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I am your host, Mike Asti, conquering sports radio, just like Sidney Crosby does, still as the best on the ice, one day at a time.